Guys, in this video we're going to discuss synthetic division. So this is kind of a nice shortcut when you're dividing polynomials, and you will see this again in some upper level math stuff. So let's get started. So basically the steps, you first want to omit all variables and exponents that are in the polynomial. So you're just going to include the numbers out in front. The second step here, you want to reverse the sign in the divisor. So say if you're dividing by an x plus 1, your divisor is now going to be a -2 instead. So this way you can add instead of subtract your values. Let's take a look at an example. I have x plus 1. I have 3x cubed minus 4x squared plus 2x minus 1. All of that divided by x plus 1. So again, I want to omit all my variables and exponents first. So I'll kind of draw some arrows here. And that will give us, underneath our dividing sign, that'll give us 3 minus 4, a +2, and a -1. Okay? I got rid of your variables and your exponents, and I just carried that down. Okay, so again, you want to kind of, instead of dividing by a 1, you're going to take that and divide by a -1, still getting rid of your variables. So that's a -1. And I should kind of make note that we don't really need this. It doesn't need to be drawn like that, but we kind of flip it. There we go. Okay, so I made this, so we kind of have some room underneath here, and that's where we will put our kind of results of our multiplying. We'll put them right under here. I did forget one step, so let me write that in. Step 3, bring down your first factor. Bring down first factor. And what do I mean by that? I'm going to bring down this 3. Every first factor here, we're going to bring that down. Alright, so now let's get started. We can start multiplying this. A -1 times a 3, I already brought down my factor, is a -3. And now we add those two things together. -4 plus a -3 is a -7. Okay, and we take a look. -7 times a -1 is a +7. And we add together to get 9. 9 times a -1 is a -9. And we add together to get a -10. So our last step is to kind of rewrite what we found to include our variables and exponents. One thing to make note, if I have a cubic function and I'm dividing by an x, my highest exponent should be squared. Okay, so this is going to be 3x squared, and kind of everything else will follow in succession. So let's see. We have a 3x squared minus 7x plus 9, which means that this is my remainder. And there's our solution. Okay, so if, for instance, if this was a little different up here, I'd say this was an x to the 4th, and I was dividing by an x, well then my first term would be a cubic term right here. Okay, so kind of know where you're going to start when you rewrite your quotient to this problem. Let's do another one. Okay, here's another problem. I have x cubed plus 4x squared plus x minus 6, all of that divided by x plus 1. So let's set up our new synthetic way to divide. So actually I'll write the numbers first. Getting rid of variables and exponents, we now have a 1, a 4, a 1, and a -6. Anything in front of x, of course, if there's nothing there, it's an implied 1. And then, let's see, let's draw our new kind of bracket. And then we want to change the sign of this positive 1 to a negative 1. Okay, and lastly, let's bring down that first term and start the multiplying process, multiplying and adding process. So we have 1 times a negative 1 gives us negative 4. Negative 4 plus a 4 is 0. 0 times negative 1 is 0. 1 plus 0 is 1. 1 times a negative 1 is negative 1. And then when we add those together, we get a negative 7. Okay, so what term do I start with? Well, again, I'm dividing a cubic by a linear variable. So this is going to be a quadratic, or an x squared. We're going to start off with that. So I have an x squared plus a 0x. You can write that if you want, or you can just choose to leave it out. Plus 1 with a remainder of negative 7. Okay? So you could say x squared plus 1, remainder 7, negative 7. Either way is fine. Oh, I just saw that I made an error, so I think my phone is ringing when this happened, but no, it happens sometimes. So let's take a look. I accidentally, let's see. It's always good to check your solutions because of something like this. So anyway, a negative 1 times a 1 is negative 1, and 4 times we're adding now. This is a 3. I think I wrote 4 here on accident. So 3 times a negative 1 is negative 3. We add those together to get a negative 2. Negative 2 times a negative 1 is a positive 2. We add those together to get negative 4. Now let's write our quadratic. So we have x squared plus a 3x minus 2, and that's a remainder of negative 4. There's our solution. Okay, let's do one more example. So we have x cubed plus 27, and we're going to divide that by x plus 3. Let's set this up. Notice that I am missing an x squared and an x, so I'm probably going to want to include that, and I'll show you how. Let's drop down our numbers. So I have a 1 here. I don't have any x squared, so that's a 0. I don't have any x, that's another 0, and then I have a 27. Again, change the symbol of what we're dividing by, and drop down that first term. Now we can go ahead and get started. Negative 3 times 1 is a negative 3. Add those together. Negative 3 times a negative 3 is a 9. Add those together. And 9 times a negative 3 is negative 27, which means basically we have no remainder. So again, we are dividing a cubic by a linear, so we should get an x squared term when we write this out. So we have x squared minus 3x plus 9 with no remainder. Alright guys, that's it for this lesson. We will see you in class. Have a good one.